Tom Pelissero, NFL Network insider. He is in Indianapolis, the Combine. He's there for the NFL Network, and that'll be Thursday through Sunday. Tom, thanks for joining us. What's the hotel lobby buzz? What's the number one topic in Indianapolis?
Well, Dan, that'll pick up starting later today. Most NFL teams, coaches, players, GMs, or excuse me, executives, scouts, GMs, they'll get in town later today. The players just started getting in. The first groups yesterday were D linemen and linebackers. So this sort of ramps up gradually throughout the course of the week. I would say, as the bars and the restaurants and the lobbies fill up here, big part of it starts out at number one in the draft and exactly what the Bears are going to end up doing, what the Bears end up doing with Justin Fields. Obviously, Caleb Williams, there's a lot of signs pointing toward the Bears just standing pat and taking him at number one overall. But certainly there are going to be conversations and phone calls, and they still got to meet with the guy. They got to meet all these, rookie quarterbacks coming into the league. So that's part of the process throughout the course of this week. Certainly, you've got some other, potential trade options out there as we go through this process. Some other quarterbacks that could be on the move. What happens with Russell Wilson? What happens with Mac Jones? What happens at a different level with Zach Wilson? Those are some of the questions as you go through it. And then, you can just go down the list and look at some of the teams with a lot of, older, more expensive players. What does Jim Harbaugh do with all those guys that he's got on his roster who are making a ton of money, like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Derwin James and Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa? Those are some of the storylines here on top of, obviously, 2 weeks from today, the free agent negotiating window opens. And if history is any guide, a lot of those big deals, maybe sort of, even if it's not allowed, might be sort of done here in Indianapolis.
I don't know if you saw Peter King's column today where he announced his retirement from writing the column, but he also floated the idea of the Bears maybe trading that number one pick, keeping Justin Fields, and then maybe trading that pick, another pick, and basically accumulating 9 first and second round picks over the next 2 years. Now, Peter just floating something isn't just anybody floating something here. What do you make of what Peter was suggesting?
Well, first of all, love Peter. And I think that I've got similar stories to a lot of other people, through the years of being I'm not that young anymore, but a young up and coming reporter and getting a random call or text or email from Peter King saying, "Hey, I liked that thing you did, Tom. That was really good." There's so many of us who, Peter, we grew up reading him in Sports Illustrated, and then he made you feel like you were an equal. And he actually did something at the Super Bowl this past year, invited a bunch of reporters out just for a big dinner with a bunch of people from competing outlets, and asked us at dinner to, share stories of something we learned from the past year. And those are things that just don't happen in the modern era of journalism. And so for Peter to put that together, I walked away going, that was one of the most meaningful things that I've done in quite a while, just hearing other people's experiences, meeting some young up and coming people, the people who are actually young now. And, that was really cool. But that's stuff that, Peter's done for a long time. He's done his job at a high level for a long time. As far as the Bears and the possibility of trading back, what I would tell you, Dan, is the Bears have not made final decisions on what they're going to do. They've not finalized anything internally. They have not, despite some questions I've heard from people in the league in the past couple of days, they have not communicated anything to Caleb Williams saying that we're definitely taking you at number one. And there's always the possibility that someone is going to make you an offer that makes you reconsider whatever your inclination was. I mean, if you go again through this offseason here, and the way that they've handled things publicly, the way that they had handled the offensive coordinator search and hiring Shane Waldron to run a certain style of offense, there's a lot of arrows that point toward this is going to end up being Caleb Williams at number one. But again, if you have that opportunity, and if you're going to trade down once, why would you not contemplate trading down twice? Unless you're going to take one of the other quarterbacks, or if you're trying to only move back a spot and let's say take Marvin Harrison Jr. or something, you could potentially trade down and continue to amass, picks into the future. Having said that, you've also got Matt Eberflus, Ryan Poles. They're entering year 3. Year 3 is always critical decision time. I don't want to say make or break, but in a lot of ways, anytime you're into year 3, you're either going to work your way into a contract extension, or you're going to work your way into somebody else having your job. To trade completely out of it, to not reset at the quarterback position would be a substantial gamble. it's one more reason that, again, nothing done, but one more reason to believe ultimately it's Caleb Williams, number one to Chicago.
Tom Pelissero, NFL Network insider. Explain to me the options that the Broncos have with Russell Wilson.
Same options that they had last year during training camp and the bye when they approached Russell Wilson about something that, quite frankly, in one regard or another, happens all the time in the NFL. In this case, it was not taking a pay cut, which dozens of players do every year. It was not giving up money. It was pushing back the vesting date on his 2025 injury guarantee to 2025 instead of having the early vesting, which if they kept Russell Wilson on the roster beyond this March 17th, now you're locked into $76 million to Russell Wilson instead of the 39 that they owe him this year, whether Russell Wilson is on the team or not. So the options are, once again, they can re-engage and Russell Wilson can agree to accept the delay in the vesting because he's not going to be a Bronco if he's not adjusted his contract come March 17th, or they, in all likelihood would release him. I don't really anticipate a trade market arising there. So it's either release or he does the restructure. The issue that you have here, because think about this, Dan, you go back to the bye week in the fall, and I know the version Russell Wilson is told, I know the version that his publicist and his agent and everybody else have put out there. From the Broncos' perspective, they were trying to do a deal that would actually keep Russell Wilson in Denver for 2024. In other words, if you didn't have to worry about that future money vesting, you would just pay him $39 million this year. You maybe would draft one, maybe not. You'd keep your options open at the quarterback position, but Russell Wilson would absolutely be the starting quarterback of the Broncos in 2024. I know he said in that interview with Brandon Marshall that he wants to be in Denver. Well, there's one way to do that, which is taking something in terms of an adjusted contract, a delayed vesting date, that last time the Broncos, in their opinion, good faith, proposes a way to keep you here. Instead, you filed a complaint with the NFL Players Association and went public and called them all a bunch of liars and said that you got benched over money. That's a lot to come back from, Dan. But if Russell Wilson and the Broncos look out there at their options and realize we're not really going to do better here and it doesn't make sense, there's still that possibility that they could find a path forward, but it's going to have to involve Russell Wilson taking a contract adjustment that he just hasn't been willing to do to this point.
Let me go back to the combine with the quarterbacks that a lot of them aren't throwing or maybe doing workouts. But if you said to NFL teams, would you rather have the interviews and the medicals over working out at the combine if you're trying to assess these quarterbacks?
Yeah, you would rather have, the interviews and the medicals, especially, there are some of these guys who that's going to be really big on. For Michael Penix Jr., he's had so many injuries through the years. Getting his medical, I talked to an executive a couple of days ago, just asking him the questions on the quarterbacks. He said, okay, with Penix, it's medical, medical, and medical, because there's so much there that you got to wrap your mind around. That's going to be a big part of the process with him. And in the interviews, I think that Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams, two guys who don't plan to throw here, those are going to be, really important. There's some things that people want to peel back the layers of with Jaden Daniels. And with Caleb Williams, he might be like kind of the first true new era NIL baby at quarterback. In other words, he's already been a professional for several years. He's made a ton of money. He's basically left in free agency in college. He's living large in Los Angeles, and he's, obviously an unbelievably talented player. But he's got a different team. He doesn't have a customary agent. I'm not really anticipating that he does the medical here either. He's probably just going to show up, do the interviews, and that's going to be it. And you're just going to want to get to know him and get to know, can you ramp him up quickly enough as a player in the NFL? You can deal with, the fact that he's got other interests and he's going to have some different things around him. I don't think there's anything that's bad there, but actually getting to sit down and get a feel for Caleb Williams, the person, and find out a little bit more about the support system that he has around him, I think is going to be big for the Bears and everybody else making this evaluation.
I'll leave you with this. With the salary cap going up, give us the team to keep an eye on spending money in free agency.
I mean, there's a lot. It is funny because, when the cap goes up, it goes up for every team, right? So all these fans are like, oh, now we've got money. It's like everybody else has that more money too. But I have talked to GMs. I talked to one a few minutes before we got on this show who was saying that's pretty good for us because if you're a team that was over the cap or had some big money stuff or you're trying to eat money and whatever this year, having that extra, depending what you were budgeting at, 10, 12, $15 million can potentially be huge. It does lend a little bit more flexibility. Now, those same players are going to be more expensive now because there is more money in the marketplace here. But in terms of who's actually spending in free agency, the Patriots have a ton of money and they've got a roster that really needs an influx of talent to it. They're not trying to win the Super Bowl this year any more than any other team is, but they're not, in other words, going all in because they've got so far to go here. But that's certainly a team that I think you're going to see be active as we go through the free agency period here. Beyond that, I think it's going to be a lot of the usual suspects that like to spend in free agency. There are some teams that are fundamentally opposed to doing it. There are other teams that always want to be in that mix. Even a team like Denver, just knowing how Sean Payton thinks, I don't know if they're going to make the same splash that they made last year, pumping a ton of money into the offensive line. But Sean wants veterans. Sean, coming up in New Orleans, is no stranger to borrowing money from the future to make something happen now. And that's where, when we talk about the Broncos having all options on the table still at quarterback, I wouldn't rule out anything in Denver, including taking a big swing at a guy like Kirk Cousins, who I know is already throwing. He's already dropping back, coming off that torn Achilles. He's going to be 36 before the season, but he is going to have a significant market. And if you're Sean Payton and you're sitting there realizing you got to compete with Jim Harbaugh and Andy Reid in the division, you're probably going to be best served doing that with a veteran quarterback, whether that's Russell Wilson or somebody else. They got to figure out what the pathway is to get one.
Have fun there. Good to talk to you as always. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
Thanks, Dan.
That's Tom Pelissero, NFL Network insider. NFL Network providing live coverage at the Combine Thursday through Sunday.